Greetings, friends in the vinyl community. Ken McAuliffe here, the jazz vinyl lover, back one more time. Welcome to Monday. I often watch the videos put on by BarakPDub, aka Paul. I don't know Paul's last name, but he does some really excellent videos, not to do with just jazz, but vinyl in general. And his videos look great. He's got a great vibe, and I wish I was that relaxed. But I'm not. I live in New York. But I watched a great video of his today where he does 10 or so of his favorite Blue Notes. So I thought I would do my 10 or so, 15 Blue Notes, but alternate from the ones he chose. I think we all obsess a little bit too much over Blue Note. You know, Impulse did great records with Rudy Van Gelder, as did Savoy. You know, what's really hard to find out in the wild is an early Savoy pressing that's not played to death. I have a few. I'm on the lookout for one with Hank Jones and Kenny Clark. That's one I'm really looking for, if you know of it out there. But, you know, Blue Note had everything. They had the design, they had the engineers, they had the great artists, they had the great compositions. But as far as a strength of a label, you know, Impulse is also excellent. You know, The House the Train Built. You should read that book if you haven't already by Rudy... Oh, geez, I can't remember his name. It's a great book all about how Coltrane and Bob Thiel founded Impulse and made it such a great label. But you also have Riverside and Prestige and Contemporary, so many great labels. And I will, in future videos, get into my favorite contemporaries, my favorite Impulses. I only have a few Impulse records. These are all Blue Note. But I'm always looking for good contemporary records. They're harder to find here. I wonder, are contemporary records easier to find on the West Coast since they're from the West Coast? Anyway, starting in no particular order. The great, epic, The Real McCoy with Elvin Jones and the great, I think, underappreciated Joe Henderson, who also made 4 or 5 tremendous records on Blue Note. And he went on to make more great records on Milestone. If you see a Joe Henderson record, buy them. They all sound great. A composer in his own way, I think, is great as Wayne Shorter, as great a tenor player, as great a presence. And he wrote great compositions as well that became standards. Blue Bossa. Anyway, this is Burning with Elvin. This is an original that I paid $20 for? That can't be right. Liberty Pressing. Maybe it is the original. But just classic Elvin Jones, wide open recording. Great example of McCoy. Away from Train. You know, if you get the McCoy records, I believe they're pre-Train on Impulse. Tonight and Tomorrow, a few other ones. I'll pull them out some other time. You hear how strong of a standards player he was before Train embedded him with those giant block chords that built up that incredible Titanic sound we think of coming down below on all those great Coltrane records. And Tony Williams Spring. Tony did 2, right? This one in Lifetime with the brown cover for Blue Note, and they're very individual, they're very unique. There's a lot of space. I guess these are the beginning of outplaying. Gary Peacock is on here, I believe. I don't want to look at it and check for sure. But beautifully abstract, sparse, artistic. Tony recorded in high res. I don't think this is that hard to find. This is a New York pressing. Another iconic, what is this, Rothko or something, takeoff? Iconic album cover, great photo of Tony there on the back. Tony Williams, such a trailblazer, also doesn't really get his due. He does among drummers, but Tony Williams basically invented jazz fusion with his first Lifetime group. I mean, you could say Miles invented it with Bitches Brew, but that was a very languorous, evolving, rotating, sort of spherical record. The early Lifetime record with Jack Bruce and John McLaughlin are just going for the jugular. And the great, you can't do without Unity, Larry Young, yet another album with supercharged Elvin Jones on it. This is a great classic. It's been reissued a million times. I know there are Music Matters versions of it out there. This, again, is a New York pressing. And with the great Woody Shaw. I think they're doing mostly Woody Shaw tracks on this record. Elvin, Larry Young, Joe Henderson. Just, if you don't have this record, rush out and get it. It's burning, you know, white-knuckle jazz performances. Larry Young was, people say, ahead of his time. No, he was perfect for his time, picking up on the modal stuff. The Coltrane was doing it, taking it out a little step further. In a lot of ways, no one took it further as far as organ goes than this guy. mean, now everything is more retro. We have Joey DeFrancesco and Gerald Gold. They are old school players. They don't. Perhaps it was just his compositions that were so fantastic. And he was such a wonderful player. And he made more albums on Blue Note we don't think about. Mothership and a few other ones. Going for more of a trendy vibe. And of course, my favorite Stanley Turrentine record of all time, with the great Mickey Roker just popping and grooving, slapping and punching his way through all the spirited whoops and hollers of Stanley Turrentine. And what a great cover, right? I love it, man. You can't beat that. I've been tossing this album back and forth with a friend of mine lately. Herbie Hancock, Inventions and Dimensions, an abstract record, which actually came after Maiden Voyage. I thought it came before, it came after, which shows how revolutionary, how evolutionary he was. This album just rides on its own plane, man, because it's very cerebral, but it's very grounded. Because you have Herbie with these two great percussionists, and Paul Chambers, who's kind of like remaking the way he plays bass as they're recording. It's a jam session. It's a think piece. They're great tunes. A lot of unusual modulations going on. It's funky. It's jazz. It's abstract. Talk about a record was ahead of his future. And he never made another record like this. You can really Herbie just hear him in the moment, just finding his way as all these Latin percussion, Afro-Cuban percussion grooves are just boiling down below. I always forget who the percussionists are here. Willie Bobo, Chihuahua Martinez. Now, wasn't it reissued as Succotash under the name of Willie Bobo with that horrible cover? I mean, that is a cover. Of course, the mighty midget, Johnny Griffin. Talk about a blowing record. This is one of the greatest blowing records of all time, as well as Blowing In from Chicago, Clifford Jordan. But this is just, whew, man, just from the get-go, they are flying high. And I believe it's Philly Joe Jones. I know you hate it when I read all these credits, but Johnny Griffin, Wynton Kelly, Curly Russell, and Max Roach. I mean, this is one of the top 10 Blue Note records, which Johnny Griffin made quite a few records for both Jazzland and for Blue Note, and they're all really tops. He's a wailing son of a bitch. Japanese only Sonny Clark release. I believe this is a full album. Japan only. Japan, you know, I think they had a love affair with Sonny Clark before and after Michael Kuskuna learned to button up his pants or something. Because there's a lot of different variations on Sonny Clark records in Japan. A really unusual record. It kind of shocked me when I got it. Elvin Jones playing with Ornette Coleman. Ornette sounding nothing like Ornette to me. There's two albums, New York Is Now, and I forgot the name of the other one, with Elvin. And it's a really totally different take for both of those musicians. Granted, it's not just those two guys. Who else is on here? Is it a gatefold? Oh, the era of the great Blue Note gatefolds. So it looks like Jimmy Garrison, Elvin Jones, and Dewey Redman. Shit, I haven't listened to this in a while. Isn't that beautiful, though? Don't you love that? Look at that, man. It's just an unusual record in the way that we're used to hearing Ornette, at least on the early records, Contemporary and Atlantic, with so much space around him, and Charlie Hayden gives him so much space, and either Shelly Manne or Ed Blackwell are, you know, they leave a lot of space. They're sparse drummers. Elvin, you know, fills up every nook and cranny and is pushing them off the cliff. And Ornette responds with a more sheets of sound kind of style. And it's really different. And it is just slamming from the first needle drop. Not that hard to find. Or maybe it is. But there's Jimmy in the background with his smoke. Can you look any cooler than that? Hope he didn't die of cancer. One of many classic Joe Henderson's, Inner Urge. What can I say that hasn't already been said? Ba-dum, 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 ba-da-bum, bam. I mean, jeez. And straight out of the Naked City, Freddie Hubbard Going Up. I actually think that is the Chase Manhattan building in the background, where I worked for 10 years until they laid me off. I used to stand in front of Ground Zero, waiting for the bus every night for 9 years straight. People forget that Ground Zero was just an empty pit for about 9 years. And I just stand down there and it was all black and oozing and ghost. And my theory is that if those buildings ever get any residents, which I can see them from my apartment, the new Twin Tower, That's going to be the most haunted building in America, right? I mean, really, 3,000 dead in like an hour and a half. Anyway, this album is very upbeat, unlike my previous comment. Philly Joe Jones, Paul Chambers, Hank Mobley, McCoy Tyner. I mean, what? Who thought this one up? This is a magnificent Freddie Hubbard in the pocket, hard bopping it all the way uptown. Then we're going to get more esoteric. The tendrils that eventually reached Jason Moran with Andrew Hill's Smokestack. These are hard to find records, but they're worth it. They also take a little more investment of your personal listening time to get and appreciate. But Hill was a great composer, totally unlike anyone else. Unusual arrangements, deep stuff, man. I don't mean deep state. And this is my nominee for the most criminally undervalued Blue Note artist who was once a giant star, Jimmy Smith. These albums will not sell in a store. They do not sell on eBay. I don't care if they're first pressing, whatever. And it's bizarre because there is some great... The recordings are just phenomenal. I mean, this is Rudy at his height. And these records have Kenny Burrell. They have Grant Green. They have all these great players. As somebody who works at a record store and sells records on eBay, they just sit there. Do yourself a favor and grab these. Because if they're in clean condition, you'll hear the art of Rudy Van Gelder, tops. This is a New York pressing. You can see that. And this one includes Eddie McFadden and Donald Bailey. Was it Dave Bailey? Donald Bailey. One of his early great trios. You hear Jimmy Smith now, sometimes he's a little corny, but most of the time he just sounds weird because he gets these like sound effects and strange effects out of the organ, which back in the early 60s was revolutionary. We don't think about it, but the B3 Hammond organ is really the first keyboard synthesizer. And he blew people's minds, which led there to be, in many cities in the Northeast, the whole idea of the blues trio and the organ trio in the bar down the street, in the inner city. Anyway, buy Jimmy Smith records. You can't go wrong. Also in the super funky vein and very hard to find, these Horace Parlan records, which sound incredibly contemporary. You put these on, they're like, wow, that is just so hip. Usually in a trio. George Tucker, Al Harewood, who played a lot with Shirley Scott, and Stanley Turrentine, a great unsung drummer, just in the pocket, in the cut. And finally, one more. Sweet Honeybee, Duke Pearson with the incredible Big Bertha. Pearson was a great big band composer, big band arranger. I imagine he probably did TV and soundtrack work. He has 3 or 4 albums on Blue Note that are pure classics. This to me being the best one perhaps. I love it. He's running up from behind. What is going to happen on later tonight, folks? Great big band arrangements, sharp, funny, witty, sassy. Mickey Roker once again, the king of Philadelphia on traps. And all the top grade A players. And then finally, a record that's very hard to find, but worth searching for, Herbie Nichols. Herbie had a thing going easily as deep as Monk. And these records are just funky. He only made a couple, I think. Herbie Nichols Trio, Al McKibben, Teddy Kotick, and Max Roach. One really searching out. I had a couple, and one's in bad shape, and this one's in great shape. This is an original 767 Lexington Avenue. I'll let you see that for fun. You see that? One day, when I have better light, we'll go through the whole PRVG 9M flat rim RVG or Van Gelder stamped or etched. There are many ways to signify Blue Note first pressing. I am by no means a master, but I know one when I see it. Hey, welcome to my crib. Have a great night.